Okay, this is John Lundeen making a video of a system for my MIS class, and I want to talk about the perspective of systems on a device that I showed you today in class, and we'll take it from there. Every system has a primary reason for being. And so when you consider the inputs and outputs and storage and feedback for those things, you need to sit there and consider what it's really the purpose of the system is. And for this type of system, this is a recorder, a video recorder. It also records sound. So as you can see, looking at the lens, the open lens here, it's the primary input for this critter is the light that goes in, and that light is basically transferred into a file or an output. And so there's the light, and then down here, of course, these are the little microphones, and they capture the sound that goes along with the light that comes in. The light and the sound aren't the only inputs to this system, but they're the two primary ones. So let's look at some of the documentation here just to kind of get an idea of what the camcorder is talking about. So some of the features and functions within it, I want to kind of step through. Wi-Fi. It basically communicates via Wi-Fi. So the Wi-Fi signals can be outputs, and they can also be inputs to the system. Baby mode is basically a monitoring mode. If you want to watch your child, you can use the camera for that. This one, the A, V, C, HD, and MP4 are file types. So that what that suggests is that if you want a certain type of file, like let's say you want to post the video on Facebook, the Facebook wants to have the videos in MP4 format. So this basically talks about how the process processes the light and sound into a file so that output can be used for Facebook. The next page shows some of the features that are part of the processes for the camera. This idea of smart audio means that the camera will decide what the best formats and lighting and things like that are. There's also the idea of actually taking a snapshot, and there's different types of filters to make the output look a different way, like an old movie or something like that. There's also the idea of face detection. It'll follow a face around so that it'll stay in focus. So if the face moves from right to left on the screen, basically it'll follow the face and keep the face in focus and won't sit there and try to focus on something that's in the center of the screen. And also the idea of image stabilization, that basically keeps it from shaking and moving around that you do when you're trying to hold the camera. The next page talks about some of the outputs that you can do it. You can basically, you can show the output on the actual LCD for the camcorder itself and look at it like that, or you can connect your camcorder to an HD TV, and you can connect it to a computer or a video recorder. So the idea is there are a number of different places that you can connect it to, and the idea of the cable is somewhat like a network. We're talking about networks in class, but it's a dedicated cable network. So there are only two devices on it, the originating device, which is the camcorder, and the TV or the camcorder or the computer where you're transferring the file or streaming the file. There are also some hints supplied in the parts that come along with it. The idea of a cable that strongly suggests that something is an input or an output from the system. So here's a power adapter. That's basically a charger. That would be an input. Okay. There's the battery pack. The battery pack is a subsystem of the whole thing, because the battery pack itself has inputs and outputs, but when you snap it in place, basically you charge it and it becomes part of the camcorder. Here's a USB cable. USB cable basically takes the file, transfers the file to a computer, and it's basically a network that goes from the camcorder to the computer. Same thing's true with this high-speed HDMI cable. It can take the content, the file, and stream it to a TV. So the function of the cable carrying things, in the case of USB, it's a whole file. In the HDMI, it's basically streaming it so the TV can play it as it gets it. So these are basically mostly inputs and outputs for the system. The next part kind of goes through and names the parts of the camcorder. And so I'm going to kind of step through the picture. Let me see if I can make that a little bigger. That's a little better. So let's kind of take things in the steps, the idea of on and off. So this is basically to start it up, and by depressing the button, that this is an input that starts up the system. This is the play button, which basically means once you've recorded a video, you can activate the output to the screen. There's a card system that's in addition to the memory of the camera itself, and that's basically a subsystem, a storage subsystem. Okay. Then you get into the idea of a microphone. This is not necessarily an input to this, but it's a substitution of the functionality of the microphone that's on the front of the camcorder. If you want something that'll do the job better quality microphone, or like a lavalier microphone or something like that, you can plug the microphone in here. AV out takes this to things like headphones and stuff. HDMI out, in other words, it basically goes to a TV. So when it says HDMI out, that means it's an output and not an input, because HDMI could possibly be an input, but not in this case. And USB, and that's basically an output file-wise to a computer or other device. So there are also other things. There's the button here, the start-stop button, which is basically where you start the recording process, you stop the recording process. There's the shutter opening and closing. So in other words, an input from that will open or close the shutter. There's also the plug port for the electricity. That's basically for power input, okay, to charge the battery. And here's the front view with the camera and the speakers. Okay, both of those are inputs. And then there's the top view. So 14 is the output for a speaker, so when you're playing the video, you can actually hear what's going on. It's a single speaker, not particularly high quality. If you want something better quality, you can plug it into the AV out and have that type of output for a better set of speakers. Okay. Then 15 is a zoom feature, so that it basically moves closer toward the thing in focus, or moves it away, so it zooms in and out. Okay, and all these things are part of the inputs that go into a camera, or outputs that come out of a camera. Now we get into the idea of the back view, and it shows a couple of things like lights. Okay, there's the access light, which basically is not real sure what access does. Probably has to do with the actual running of the, so in other words, it's like red or green, it's basically recording. And then there's the power charging light, which is feedback for the fact that the battery is being charged, and when it's red it's being charged, and when it's green it basically is or when it goes out it's fully charged, and then you turn it on and it goes green and shows the battery is in good shape. Okay. Also on the bottom there are things that are important, this idea of there's a mount for a tripod, so you can mount it on a tripod, and that way it makes the shot a little more stable. And then the idea is the battery release, which basically helps to separate the battery subsystem from the camera. And then we go to the screen, the LCD panel. One of the things about an LCD panel is its primary function is for output, so that you can see what you've recorded or see what's coming through the lens. And so that's the first thing. But the next thing is it's a touch screen, so now they can display things that are feedback, so it's kind of like a dashboard for your camera. And not only can you view what the dashboard icons and indicators are, like say battery level, things like that, but you can also sit there and touch the screen and activate menus for other types of input. So I mentioned the fact that when you're looking for inputs for systems, forms is a dead giveaway. Another dead giveaway for inputs for a system are menus, because menus kind of step you through a process of getting to the instructions that you want so you can give it the right input. So we've talked about inputs and processes and outputs of this camcorder. One thing we haven't talked about is storage. And so storage, there are some internal storage in this particular camcorder, and you can also have SD and SDXC cards, memory cards, that basically will store the video file. So part of this video file would be a file that is actually kept on this SD device. So in storage, the SD card, which is a little storage chip that goes in the camcorder, has the video files, which have two different choices. They can either be stored in a file, which is the AVCHD, or the MP4 choices, and they have to do with quality of the video. And also there are shots that you can take which are just pictures, not movies, and they're done in JPEG. So you get JPEG, MP4, and AVCHD files of what comes through the lens as inputs and sounds, and made into a file for display on the LCD, or shoot him over to a TV or to a computer. Now, where are the transactions, you say? The most active, the best, the real transaction is when you mash the record button, and all of a sudden all that light that comes through the lens and all the sound that comes through the microphone basically starts getting written to a file, and it records until you mash that record button a second time, and it completes the recording and stores it on the SD card. Now, once it's done that, it's got to sit there and put a record in. Remember a record in with a unique identifier, and typically with a file name. They usually default to some type of unique identifier for the particular device, DNC001 or something like that. And then they'll have a start time and end time and other fields, other attributes of, you know, kind of what type of video recording it is, or what kind of, if it's a JPEG. So those are all kind of part of the record, but there's a unique identifier. Now the next question is with the JPEG files, and I don't know the answer to this, the JPEG files, are they associated with a certain video? Because if they are, then there needs to be a foreign key in the video file that points to the pictures that would be taken while the video was being taken also. So anyway, so there you got transactions, and now you've got a table because you've got a primary key and attributes and records for each one of the video clips that you shoot, and that comprises the database table. Okay, I think that kind of wraps it up for what we're expected on Friday. I'll hang this guy out on YouTube and send you an email where I put it. Talk to you soon.